Ambassador Kim wiped the sweat from his palms as he stood in the massive communication, centered deep beneath Seoul. The room buzzed with activity as technicians made final adjustments to the most powerful transmission array humanity had ever built. This wasn't just another diplomatic message. This was Earth's last attempt at peace before everything changed forever. Kim had been preparing for this moment his entire career. At 62 years old, he carried the scars of 5 decades of rejected peace offers, broken promises, and diplomatic humiliations. His gray hair and lined face told the story of countless sleepless nights, spent crafting proposals that alien species would dismiss without even reading. The holographic display showed a real-time map of the galaxy, with red dots marking every species that had either ignored or actively rejected humanity's attempts at friendship. There were hundreds of them, scattered across thousands of star systems, all united in their belief that humans were nothing more than primitive animals who had accidentally stumbled into space travel. Signal strength at maximum, called out. Technician Yang, from her control station. All relay stations are online and ready for galaxy-wide broadcast. Kim nodded and stepped up to the podium. Behind him, the 3 other senior diplomats who had fought alongside him for decades stood in respectful silence. Lee had lost her son when alien pirates destroyed a human research vessel. Park had watched his carefully negotiated trade agreements torn up and laughed at by species who considered human technology worthless. Choi had been personally insulted by 12 different alien ambassadors who refused to even acknowledge her as an equal. The transmission began, and Kim's voice carried across impossible distances to reach every inhabited world in the galaxy. His words were translated into thousands of languages by the most advanced AI systems Earth could build, ensuring that no species could claim they misunderstood humanity's final message. People of the stars, Kim began, his voice carrying the weight of an entire species' hopes and dreams. For 50 long years, we have reached out to you with open hands and open hearts. We have shared our music, our art, our scientific discoveries. We have offered to trade our resources, our knowledge, even our friendship, asking for nothing in return except the chance to join your cosmic community as equals. The words hung in the air like a prayer, transmitted across light years to reach alien ears that had grown deaf to human pleas. Kim thought about all the times he had stood before alien councils, hat in hand, begging for just a moment of consideration. He remembered the laughter, the dismissive waves, the security guards who had escorted him out of buildings like he was some kind of dangerous criminal. We have been patient beyond measure, Kim continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. When your warships destroyed our merchant vessels, we asked for investigations instead of demanding revenge. When your media called us primitives and savages, we responded with more offers of cultural exchange. When you rejected our scientists, breakthrough discoveries as inferior copies of your own work, we simply worked harder to prove our worth. The technicians monitoring the transmission reported that it was being received across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, alien beings were hearing humanity's final diplomatic message, though most would probably ignore it, just like they had ignored all the others. Kim's voice took on an edge that hadn't been there before. But understand this, people of the stars, we have tried peace, we've offered friendship. We have shown you who we are and what we stand for. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Do not confuse our desire for peace with an inability to defend ourselves. This is our final offer. Answer with wisdom or answer with war. The choice is yours. The transmission ended, leaving the communication center in absolute silence. Kim stepped back from the podium, knowing that humanity's fate now rested in alien hands. They had tried everything else. Now, they would wait to see if the galaxy would finally listen. Commander Zhang was reviewing routine supply reports when the first emergency alert screamed across her console. The diplomatic vessel Harmony had been stationed at the edge of human space for 3 days, waiting for any response. To Ambassador Kim's final message, what came next would haunt her dreams for the rest of her life. The initial report seemed impossible to believe. New Busan, a thriving agricultural colony with over 2 million inhabitants, had simply disappeared. It's not destroyed in battle, not Evacuated, not conquered, completely erased from existence in a single blinding flash of antimatter explosions. The planet's surface had been turned to glass, its atmosphere stripped away, leaving nothing but a dead rock floating in space. Lieutenant Yun. The ship's communications officer frantically worked his console as more reports flooded in. His hands shook as he processed the incoming data streams. Commander, we're getting emergency signals from the Kepler system. The mining colonies are under attack. Jang watched in horror as the tactical display showed 3 massive alien battleships, systematically destroying every human settlement on Kepler 4-4-B. The domed cities that had taken decades to build cracked open like eggs, their protective barriers useless against the overwhelming firepower of the Zephyrian war fleet. Families who had been eating breakfast just hours earlier were now fleeing through corridors filling with toxic atmosphere, their children crying as emergency sirens wailed their final warnings. The attack wasn't random or impulsive. It was calculated, methodical, designed to cause maximum psychological damage. The aliens had chosen civilian targets, specifically places where humans lived, worked, and raised their families. Places that had no military value, but enormous emotional significance. Many survivors? Zhang asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. Preliminary estimates suggest less than 50,000 made it to the evacuation ships, Yun reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The rest, ... The rest didn't have time to escape. The bridge fell silent, except for the steady hum of the ship's engines. Every person present understood what this meant. The galaxy had given humanity its answer, and that answer was written in the blood of innocent civilians. Children who had never held a weapon, elderly colonists who had spent their lives growing food to feed others, young families just starting their lives together, all gone in an instant. Then the secondary transmission arrived. And somehow, things got even worse. Commander, we're receiving a direct communication from the consortium fleet, Yun announced, his face pale with disgust. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. They want everyone to see this. The main screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of a Zephyrian battleship. The alien admiral stood before the camera, his reptilian features twisted into what might have been a smile if it weren't so cruel. His scales were a deep purple color. His eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator that had cornered its prey. Behind him, human survivors knelt in chains. Men and women who had been living peaceful lives just hours ago were now prisoners. Their clothes torn, their faces bearing the marks of beatings. Some were barely conscious, others stared ahead with the hollow eyes of people who had seen too much horror in too short a time. Behold your pathetic species, the alien commander spoke. His words translated by computer systems that made his voice sound even more inhuman. These specimens will be transported to our research facilities where they will be studied, dissected, and displayed as examples of what happens to inferior races who dare to speak to their betters as equals. The camera panned across the prisoners, and Zhang recognized some of the faces. Dr. Min, who had developed new farming techniques that could feed millions. Teacher Hong, who had spent her life educating children about the wonders of the universe. Engineer Beak, whose innovations had made space travel safer for everyone. The transmission continued with footage that made Zhang's blood run cold. Human. Children being separated from their parents. Elderly colonists being beaten for the entertainment of alien crowds. Survivors being herded into cargo holds like animals. The message was clear. This was what the galaxy thought of humanity's offer of friendship. Your final offer has been rejected, the Admiral hissed, his forked tongue flicking between his teeth. Surrender now, and we may allow some of your kind to live as slaves. Continue to resist, and we will hunt down every human in the galaxy until none remain. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Commander Zhang stared at the blank screen for a long moment, processing what she had just witnessed. Then she turned to her communications officer with eyes that had gone hard as steel. Yun, send a priority message to Earth. Use authorization code Sleeping Giant. Tell them the galaxy has made its choice. Tell them it's time to show these aliens what happens when when you hurt humanity's children. Captain Kong gripped the armrests of his command chair as the Bison's revenge drifted silently through the void toward the consortium's most important
military
installation. The Proxima Centauri base had been built over 30 years ago as a symbol of alien dominance over human space. Its massive structure stretched across several asteroids, connected by armored bridges and protected by enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. For decades, this base had been the staging ground for attacks on human merchant vessels. Its fighters had hunted down defenseless cargo ships. Its commanders had laughed as they watched human crews die in the vacuum of space. The alien officers stationed here had celebrated each successful raid against human colonies, treating the deaths of innocent civilians like victories in some twisted game. Now, as Kang watched the base grow larger on his view screen, he felt a cold satisfaction knowing that humanity's patience had finally reached its end. The aliens had mistaken human restraint for weakness, and now they were about to learn the difference between the two. Phantom Squadron reporting all systems green, Lieutenant Cho announced from his tactical station. The young officer had lost his entire family when the aliens destroyed New Busan, and his voice carried the controlled fury of someone who had seen too much death. Wraith Squadron is in position on the base's far side. All ships are maintaining stealth protocols. The human vessels move through space like predators stalking their prey. Their hulls were coated with materials that absorbed sensor waves instead of reflecting them, making them nearly invisible to conventional detection systems. Advanced computer systems analyzed enemy scanning patterns and adjusted the ship's electromagnetic signatures in real time, ensuring they remained hidden until the moment of attack. Kong studied the tactical display showing the base's defenses. Hundreds of weapon platforms, squadrons of fighter craft, and shield generators that could protect against massive bombardments. The consortium had built this facility to be absolutely impregnable, a fortress that could withstand any assault. Humanity might be able to mount. They had been wrong about that, just like they had been wrong about everything else. Analysis complete, reported the ship's artificial intelligence. Primary command center identified. Secondary targets include fighter bays, weapons control, and shield generators. Civilian quarters and medical facilities have been marked as restricted zones. This was the difference between humans and aliens. Even in war, even after witnessing the massacre of their own people, humans still distinguished between military targets and innocent lives. The base housed thousands of alien civilians, technicians, medical staff, families of military personnel. Those people would be protected, even though their own military had shown no such mercy to human colonists. All squadrons, this is Ghost-led, Kong announced over the secure communication channel. Begin final approach. Remember, we're not here to become monsters. We're here to end this war as quickly and cleanly as possible. The Bison's revenge dropped its stealth field and opened fire with weapons that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about human technology. Plasma cannons that could slice through energy shields like they were made of paper. Missiles that used advanced artificial intelligence to dodge point defense systems and find the weakest spots in enemy armor. Energy beams that seemed to bend. Space itself, striking targets that should have been protected by multiple layers of defensive barriers. The base's automated systems screamed warnings in a dozen alien languages as human ships materialized from empty space like ghosts becoming solid. The consortium's defenders scrambled to respond, but their weapons had been designed to fight conventional enemies. They had no answer for ships that could appear and disappear at will, that could change course with impossible speed, that could strike from angles that violated the basic laws of physics. Enemy fighters launching from bays 7 through 12, Cho reported as alien craft poured from the base's hangar decks. They're moving to intercept our attack squadrons, Commander. Lim's voice crackled over the radio from his fighter cockpit. Phoenix Squadron engaging. These pilots don't know what they're up against. The human fighter pilots had been born different from their parents. Genetic modifications that had been carefully hidden for generations now revealed themselves in combat. Enhanced reflexes allowed them to react faster than alien computers could calculate. Improved spatial awareness let them navigate three-dimensional battlefields with intuitive precision. Their bodies could withstand crushing G-forces that would kill most organic beings. The alien fighters found themselves facing opponents who moved like they were part of their machines. Who could predict enemy movements before they happened? Who could survive maneuvers that should have been impossible for any living creature to endure? Base Command Center neutralized, Cho announced. As explosions blossomed across the enemy installation, fighter bays are offline, shield generators destroyed, remaining weapon systems are powering down. The battle had lasted less than 20 minutes. A fortress that had taken decades to build and had been considered impregnable had been reduced to a crippled hulk in the time it took to drink a cup of coffee. But what happened next surprised the galaxy, even more than the swift victory. Human Marines in powered armor that made them look like metallic angels descended on the damaged base. But instead of executing prisoners or looting the facility, they began organizing evacuations of wounded aliens to medical facilities. Kong opened a communication channel that broadcast across the galaxy. "This is Captain Kang of the human fleet. We came for military targets only. Your civilians are safe under our protection. This is what human warfare looks like: precise, professional, and without unnecessary cruelty. Surrender now and live." Dr. Shin sat in her underground laboratory beneath the Korean mountains, while surrounded by monitors displaying intelligence reports from across the galaxy. For the first time in 50 years, alien species were actually paying attention to humanity, and what they were discovering terrified them beyond anything they had ever imagined. The secret had been humanity's greatest achievement and its most carefully guarded mystery. When first contact occurred in 2075, Earth's leaders had made a decision that would shape the future of the human race. They had seen how the galaxy treated species they considered weak or primitive, and they had chosen to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. The Vorthok Military Council has been in emergency session for 18 hours straight. Agent Park reported, her fingers dancing across holographic displays showing intercepted alien communications. Their generals are reviewing every piece of combat footage from Proxima Centauri, trying to understand how our pilots could move the way they did. What the aliens were seeing violated everything they thought they knew about human biology. Fighter pilots pulling maneuvers that should have turned their internal organs to paste. Ground soldiers reacting to threats faster than computer systems could track. Ship crews working together with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. The truth was both simpler and more complex than the aliens could imagine. Designed to push human capabilities to their absolute limits. Enhanced muscle density that made them stronger than any natural human had ever been. Improved neural pathways that allowed their brains to process information at superhuman speeds. Resistance to radiation, toxins, and environmental hazards that would kill most alien species. "They're calling it the human revelation," Park continued, unable to hide the pride in her voice. Military analysts across the galaxy are frantically revising their assessments of human capabilities. The Zephyrian Intelligence Service has declared a code red emergency. They're demanding explanations from their own scientists about how they could have been so wrong. Dr. Shin smiled as she reviewed the biological data streaming in from human forces across the galaxy. Heart rates that remained steady under extreme stress. Reaction times that bordered on precognitive. Coordination between team members that seemed to operate on a level beyond normal human communication. The modifications weren't just physical. 3 generations of careful genetic selection had enhanced human intelligence, pattern recognition, and tactical thinking. Microscopic cybernetic implants, virtually undetectable even to advanced medical scanners, allowed soldiers to share information instantaneously without radio communication. Their brains could process battlefield data faster than most alien computer systems, adapting to new situations with a speed that seemed almost supernatural. "General Bay wants to know if we're ready for Phase 2, Park said, her expression growing serious. "The consortium's secondary bases are heavily fortified. They'll be expecting us this time." "Let them expect us," Dr. Shin replied, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had spent decades preparing for this moment. Expectation won't help them when they don't understand what they're facing. The holographic displays showed human forces advancing on multiple fronts, each victory more decisive than the last. Ships that should have been overwhelmed by superior numbers instead carved through enemy formations like apex predators hunting prey. Ground forces that moved with impossible coordination, their enhanced abilities allowing them to accomplish objectives that should have required 10 times their numbers. The hegemony of distant suns has withdrawn from the anti-human alliance, Park reported. They're claiming neutrality, but intelligence suggests they're actually considering switching sides. The combat footage has them convinced that opposing humanity is suicide. Dr. Shin nodded, understanding the psychology at work. For 50 years, these species had dismissed humans as primitive animals who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than skill. They had laughed at human technology, scorned human diplomacy, and treated human lives as worthless. Now they were discovering that every assumption they had made was catastrophically wrong. The consortium is trying to rally the remaining species, Park continued. They're claiming we're some kind of biological weapon, an artificially created race designed for warfare. They're not entirely wrong, Dr. Shin admitted with a cold smile. We just never told them we had weaponized ourselves. After 50 years of being treated like animals, I think it's time they learned why predators evolved to be patient. The modifications had been subtle enough to hide from alien medical scanners, designed to appear as natural human variation rather than artificial enhancement. Parents had watched their children grow up stronger, faster, and smarter than any previous generation, knowing that someday those gifts might be the only thing standing between humanity and extinction. Phase 2 begins tomorrow, Dr. Shin announced. Target the consortium's secondary bases. Show the galaxy that Proxima Centauri wasn't luck or surprise, it was just the beginning. The aliens were about to learn that underestimating humanity had been the greatest mistake in galactic history. The species they had dismissed as primitive was about to demonstrate why humans had evolved as persistence hunters, why they had climbed to the top of their world's food chain, and why patience was just another word for preparing for war. Major Yoon stood in the Psychological Warfare Center, watching her team work with the precision of master craftsmen. The room hummed with quiet activity as specialists analyzed enemy communications, tracked social media networks, and prepared messages that would shake the foundations of the galaxy's understanding of human nature. Sergeant Kim, what's the status? On the Third Fleet families? She asked, moving between workstations where her analysts pored over intercepted alien communications. We've located the relatives of every commanding officer in the Zephyrian Third Fleet, Kim reported his screen, displaying hundreds of alien faces organized by family connections, mothers, fathers, siblings, children, all living normal lives on civilian worlds, completely unaware that their loved ones are fighting humans. The strategy Yoon had developed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen in warfare. Instead of the traditional approach of threatening enemy civilians to break military morale, her team did something that confused and terrified alien commanders far more effectively. They showed mercy to captured soldiers, and then let those soldiers contact their families directly. Send the recordings, Yoon ordered. But remember, we're not just sending messages. We're showing them who we really are. The messages that went out across alien communication networks were unlike anything their recipients had ever received. Zephyrian mothers expecting news of their sons' deaths in battle instead received videos of those same sons recovering in clean, well-equipped human medical facilities. The captured soldiers looked healthy, well-fed, and most importantly, alive. Scales are healing properly, one young Zephyrian pilot explained to his worried parents in a video message. The human doctors say, I'll be able to fly again once this war is over. They've been treating me better than our own military hospitals ever did. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Alien families had been told that humans were savage monsters who tortured prisoners and destroyed everything they touched. Instead, they were seeing evidence that human captivity was safer than their own military service. Lieutenant Chen monitored the responses flooding through alien social networks. The reaction is exactly what we hoped for, she reported, translating. Intercepted communications. Zephyrian families are demanding to know why their government is fighting people who treat prisoners so well. Vorthok parents are asking their military leaders to explain why humans are providing better medical care than their own species. But the real breakthrough came when human forces encountered a consortium supply convoy heading toward a civilian colony. The convoy's commander, terrified of what he expected to be a massacre, prepared for the worst as human warships surrounded his vessels. Captain Moon's voice crackled over the communication channel, speaking in fluent Zephyrian. "Convoy commander, we've scanned your cargo. You're carrying food and medical supplies to civilian populations. We're not here to hurt innocent people." What happened next stunned the galaxy. Instead of destroying or capturing the convoy human, ships formed a protective escort around the alien vessels, guiding them safely through space that had become dangerous due to the ongoing war. Human engineers helped repair damaged convoy ships. Human medical teams treated injured alien crew members, and human pilots flew cover missions to protect the supply run from pirates and raiders. "I don't understand," the Zephyrian convoy commander transmitted back to his superiors. "They could have killed us all. They could have stolen our supplies. Instead, they're protecting us like we're their own people." News of the incident spread through alien communication networks faster than any military intelligence service could contain it. Civilian populations across the galaxy watched video footage of human soldiers sharing their own food rations with alien refugees, of human medics working around the clock to save alien lives, of human engineers repairing alien infrastructure that had been damaged in the fighting. The psychological effect was more devastating than any weapon humanity had ever deployed. Alien species had built their entire understanding of the war on the assumption that humans were violent, primitive creatures who would behave exactly like every other conquering species in galactic history. The reality of human behavior shattered those assumptions completely. "The hegemony of distant suns is requesting emergency diplomatic talks," Chen reported, her voice filled with amazement. 3 of their outer colonies have declared neutrality. The Vorthok Parliament is in emergency session, and preliminary reports suggest they're considering withdrawing from the war entirely. Major Yoon smiled as she watched the intelligence reports streaming in from across the galaxy. "This is how we win," she explained to her staff. "Not by becoming the monsters they expected us to be, but by proving we're better than they are. Every act of kindness is a weapon against their propaganda. Every life we save is a victory against their lies." The galaxy was learning that humans fought wars differently than any species they had ever encountered. Instead of trying to break their enemies through fear and brutality, humans were winning hearts and minds by demonstrating that their desire for peace had never been weakness. It had been strength all along. Admiral An stood at the observation deck of the Soul's Pride, looking down at the homeworld of the Zephyrian Consortium through the reinforced transparent aluminum windows. The planet below was beautiful in a way that made her heart ache with sadness. Crystal spires reached toward the sky like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of twin suns and creating rainbow patterns across the cloud layers. It was hard to believe that such beauty had been built on so much suffering for. Over 2 centuries, the Zephyrians had conquered dozens of worlds, enslaving entire species to build their magnificent cities. The labor of billions of alien beings had gone into creating the paradise that now spread beneath her ship, and most of those workers had died in the process. "Admiral, we're receiving multiple surrender offers," Commander Zheng reported from her position at the communication station. 12 different planetary governments are trying to negotiate separately. They're all claiming they were forced to participate in the war against their will. An almost laughed at the irony. These were the same governments that had celebrated the destruction of New Busan, the same leaders who had broadcast footage of human prisoners being tortured for entertainment. Now, with human ships hanging in orbit above their most precious worlds, they were suddenly eager to talk about peace. "How many civilians are we detecting on the surface?" she asked, studying the scanner readings that showed massive population centers scattered across the planet's continents. "Approximately 4 billion Zephyrians," Zheng replied. "Another billion members of various other species, mostly in what appear to be worker districts. The cities are densely populated, but most of the military installations are separate from civilian areas." This was the moment that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. The Zephyrians had given them every reason to seek revenge, every justification for the kind of brutal conquest that had been the standard for galactic warfare for thousands of years. The aliens below expected orbital bombardment, expected their cities to be reduced to ash, expected their people to be enslaved just as they had enslaved others. Open a channel to the entire system unordered. All frequencies, all communication. Networks. I want every being in this solar system to hear what I have to say. The communication systems of the Soul's Pride reached out across space, tapping into every satellite, every communication relay, every personal device that could receive a signal. Her image appeared on screens across the planet, from the luxury towers of Zephyrian aristocrats to the crowded housing blocks where enslaved workers lived. People of the Zephyrian Consortium, she began, her voice carrying the weight of 50 years of rejected diplomacy and broken promises. For half a century, we extended our hand to you in friendship. We offered to share our knowledge, our resources, our very culture with you. We asked for nothing in return, except the chance to live in peace. The alien cities below fell silent as her words echoed through their streets. In the worker districts, enslaved beings from dozens of species stopped their tasks to listen. In the government towers, Zephyrian leaders huddled around communication devices, trying to gauge whether this was a demand for surrender or a final warning before annihilation. We offered you partnership, and you chose domination, An continued, her voice growing harder. We offered you trade, and you chose theft. We offered you peace, and you chose war. You murdered our children, enslaved our people, and mocked our desire for friendship. You treated us like animals because you believed we were weak. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the galaxy, other species watched the transmission, waiting to see if humanity would finally reveal its true nature. Would they prove themselves to be just another conquering species, or would they do something that the galaxy had never seen before? You face the consequences of your choices unannounced. But understand this: we will not destroy your cities. We will not enslave your people. We will not reduce your worlds to ash and bone. We are not you. What happened next shocked the galaxy. Instead of massive bombardment ships preparing to glass the planet, human vessels began deploying. Landing craft. But these weren't invasion forces designed to conquer and pillage. They were peacekeeping units, their soldiers carrying non-lethal weapons and medical supplies. We will remove your military government, unannounced as human ships descended. Toward the planet's surface, you will free the slaves you have kept in bondage. You will dismantle the systems of oppression you have built. But we will not harm your civilians, and we will not seek revenge for your crimes. The landing forces moved with surgical precision, targeting only military installations and government centers. Alien civilians watched in amazement as human soldiers, who spoke their language and understood their customs, protected them from the chaos of their government's collapse. Your military is defeated, On's final transmission declared. Your government is dissolved. Your people are free. This is how humans wage war, not for conquest, but for justice. Not for revenge, but for the future? The galaxy watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated that true strength wasn't about the ability to destroy, but about the wisdom to show mercy even to those who had shown none to them. General Quan walked through the ornate corridors of what had once been the Zephyrian Consortium's most sacred building, the Supreme Council Chamber, where alien leaders had made decisions that affected the lives of trillions across the galaxy. The walls were covered with murals depicting the Consortium's greatest victories, showing conquered species kneeling before Zephyrian overlords in scenes of triumph that now seemed like relics from a different age. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of alien architecture, with a domed ceiling that showed real-time images of the stars and floating platforms that had once held the seats of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Now those same platforms held the defeated leadership of the Consortium, their proud bearing replaced by the slumped postures of those who had seen their entire worldview shattered. High Admiral Zorith, once the most feared military commander in the galaxy, sat with his magnificent purple scales dulled to a sickly gray color. His ceremonial crest, which had once stood tall as a symbol of his authority, now lay flat against his skull in the universal Zephyrian gesture of submission. Around him, other alien leaders showed similar signs of defeat, their elaborate uniforms torn and stained, their confident expressions replaced by looks of confusion and fear. We formally surrender all military forces under our command, Zorth managed to say. His words translated by computer systems that made his voice sound hollow and mechanical. Our fleets will stand down.
Ow!
Our weapons will be deactivated. We await your terms for our capitulation. The alien leaders had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying the historical records of galactic conquests to understand what would be expected of them. They had prepared lists of tribute they could offer, maps of territories they could cede, and inventories of slaves they could provide. They had even identified which of their own people could be sacrificed to appease their human conquerors. We have prepared comprehensive databases of our resources, another Zephyrian official added, his voice shaking as he gestured to holographic displays showing mineral wealth, industrial capacity, and population statistics. We can provide detailed maps of our territories, complete inventories of our military assets, and full documentation of our subject species. We await your demands for tribute and territorial concessions. The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound in the chamber was the soft hum of the environmental systems. General Quan stood quietly, studying the faces of the alien leaders who had spent decades dismissing humanity as a primitive species unworthy of basic respect. Colonel Yu, Major Nam, and the other human officers who had planned this campaign watched their commander with expressions of quiet pride. You misunderstand our intentions, Quan said finally, his voice carrying across the chamber with calm authority. We don't want your tribute. We don't want your territories. We certainly don't want your slaves. The confusion that spread across the alien faces was almost comical. Their translators worked frantically, running the words through multiple verification protocols to ensure they had understood correctly. In their experience, conquest always meant subjugation. Victory, always, meant the winner taking everything of value from the loser. What we want, Quan continued, gesturing to holographic displays that showed human-age ships already moving toward damaged consortium worlds, is peace, a real peace, not the false calm that comes from oppression. We want to rebuild what was destroyed. In this war, we want to heal the wounds that have been opened. We want to create something better than what came before. The terms that Quan presented were unlike anything in the recorded history of galactic warfare. Full reconstruction aid for worlds damaged during the conflict. Human engineering teams working alongside alien workers to rebuild stronger than before. Cultural preservation agreements to protect alien traditions and ensure that conquered species could maintain their unique identities. Democratic reforms to give civilian populations a voice in their government for the first time in centuries. But the most shocking term was the offer of equal partnership in a new galactic confederation. Not subjugation, not tribute, not territorial concessions, but genuine cooperation between former enemies. But why? High Admiral Zoreth asked, his voice barely above a whisper. We destroyed your colonies. We enslaved your people. We called you primitives and savages. We mocked your offers of friendship for 50 years. Why would you show us mercy? We never showed you. General Quan's smile was sad but genuine, carrying the weight of all the suffering that had led to this moment. Because proving you wrong is more satisfying than proving you right. You thought we were monsters hiding behind masks of civilization. We choose to be better than your expectations. The ceremony concluded with something the galaxy had never witnessed. Former enemies shaking hands as equals. The Zephyrians, broken by defeat but lifted by unexpected mercy, began to understand what they had truly lost in rejecting humanity's friendship all those years ago. The war is over, Quan announced to the watching galaxy. The peace begins now. Ambassador Lee walked through the same transmission chamber where humanity had made its final plea for peace just 1 year ago. Room that had once echoed with desperate hope, now hummed with the productive energy of dozens of species working together toward a common future. Holographic displays showed trade routes connecting hundreds of worlds, scientific data flowing between research stations, and cultural exchange programs that would have been impossible to imagine during the dark days of the war. The transformation had been remarkable beyond anyone's wildest expectations. The Zephyrian Consortium worlds, which had been centers of oppression and slavery for centuries, were now thriving democracies where former slaves worked alongside their former masters as equals. The crystal cities that had once been monuments to alien supremacy were now symbols of cooperation, their spires reaching toward the stars as beacons of hope rather than domination. "Ambassador, the latest economic reports are in," announced Economic Advisor Moon, her tablet glowing with charts and graphs that told the story of unprecedented galactic prosperity. "The trade agreements with the Vorthok hegemony are proceeding ahead of schedule. Their crystal-growing technology has revolutionized our construction methods, while our manufacturing processes have increased their production efficiency by 300%. Lee nodded, studying the data that showed resource flows between worlds that had been enemies just months ago. The Vorthok had been among the most reluctant to accept human friendship, their crystalline society valuing isolation and self-sufficiency. Above all else, now they were enthusiastic partners, their technology helping to build new cities on worlds that had been devastated by the war. "The joint research stations are exceeding all our projections," added Captain SEO, who had transitioned. "From military service to diplomatic work after the war's end, Zephyrian biotechnology, human engineering, and Vorthok energy systems are creating innovations that none of us could have achieved working alone. We're on the verge of breakthroughs in medicine, space travel, and environmental restoration that will benefit every species in the galaxy." But the real victory wasn't visible in economic statistics or scientific achievements. It was in the thousands of personal stories that arrived daily from across the galaxy. Letters from alien children, who were learning human languages and making friends with human students through cultural exchange programs. Messages from human researchers who were studying at xenological universities on distant worlds, expanding their understanding of the universe through alien perspectives. Reports from refugee programs that had reunited families separated by decades of conflict and oppression. "We've received another request to join the Alliance," Lee announced, holding up a communication crystal that pulsed with soft light. "The hegemony of distant suns has formally applied for membership. Their diplomatic message specifically mentions our unique approach to conflict resolution as their primary motivation." The room erupted in quiet laughter as the staff processed this latest development. The galaxy had learned to fear human warfare not for its brutality, but for its mercy. Species after species had watched the consortium's transformation from oppressor to partner and decided they wanted no part of being humanity's enemy. The alliance that had started as a desperate defensive measure had become the most powerful force for peace and prosperity the galaxy had ever known. "There's something else," Lee continued, her expression growing serious as she gestured to the long-range sensor displays. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected artificial signals from beyond the galactic rim. Another civilization is approaching our borders, one that appears to be even more advanced than anything we've encountered before." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. First contact with a truly alien intelligence, one that might make the same mistakes the consortium had made. The newcomers might see the diverse alliance of species working together and assume it was a sign of weakness rather than strength. "What are your orders, Ambassador?" asked Admiral Park, her hand already moving toward the communication controls. "That could send messages across impossible distances." Lee smiled, and in that expression lay all the wisdom humanity had gained through decades of war and peace. "Send them a message. Tell them we come in friendship. Tell them we offer partnership, not domination. Tell them we want to trade knowledge, not conquer worlds. 8. Tell them we've built something here that benefits everyone." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of humans and aliens working side by side, former enemies who had become closer than family. "And tell them," she added with quiet confidence, "that we've learned there's nothing more powerful than turning an enemy into a friend. We told the galaxy we wanted peace. We just never said we'd ask nicely twice. The transmission began, carrying humanity's message of hope to the stars once again. Behind it lay the promise that had become the foundation of the new galactic order, that strength without mercy was meaningless, that victory without compassion was hollow, and that the greatest weapon any species could wield was the courage. To choose peace over vengeance, the war was over. Peace would endure.